Hi, and welcome to Education in a Time of War. My name is Rachel Raz, and here with me today is Jake Donnelly. Today is December 28, 2023, and Jake is working at the IAC, Israeli-American Council, in New England, and his role is Activism Manager. And I reached out to Jake as part of this vlogs that I'm doing and conversation to share some thoughts and some ideas and hopefully some positive action item that we can do to ensure good education and safe places for our students in Israel and around the world. And hopefully it's a message also not just about this specific conflict, but also about other conflicts and just as good practices about hate and education. So we're talking about the war in Israel that started in October 7, 2023 by the Hamas terror organization with shooting of missiles all over many cities in Israel, the killing, murdering of many civilians, kidnapping people. And as we're sitting right now, the war is still going on and actually expanded also to fighting from Hamas in Lebanon, from Yemen, and a few other players in the region. So unfortunately, we are 2 months and almost 3 weeks, and we are still in this situation. And we are sitting, both of me and Jake, in Massachusetts, in the United States, and it seems very far. We're almost 5,500 miles away from this physical conflict, but we saw that it's actually impacting us and children and education system here in America and here in New England. And I know that sometimes people are surprised that there is this effect of something that's happening so far away, but it's actually touching and impacting us here at home. And I would add to it that before September 7th, Israeli family reached out to me and said that their child in school, in a local school in the Boston area, he came for a display about different clubs in their school, and they found that there's going to be a Palestinian club. And this particular student and many other students felt very threatened, especially with some of the language that they used the language about one state solution, which is Palestinian, which is mean that it's the destruction of Israel. And Jake, you can correct me if I'm wrong. The right to return for Palestinian, full support of BDS, and a few other things that was very, very disturbing for those students, again, being far away from this conflict. It wasn't a club about conflicts around the world. It wasn't a club about promoting peace between Palestinians and Israelis. It was really taking a specific side with specific agenda, including raising money. And when this family reached out to me, immediately I reached out to Jake, and Jake will tell us a little bit about his role and how what was the role before September 7th with a case like this, and what is how it really changed and the world changed, not just in that region, but also for us here. So welcome, Jake, and thank you for taking the time and sharing some of your knowledge and expertise.
Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me on, Rachel. And yes, there's been a complete difference between my job prior to October 7th and my job post-October 7th. That slide that you showed with the Palestine Club, the Palestinian Club, that was usually what I would do on a daily basis. I'd probably get 1 to 2 incidences of either anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism a week prior to October 7th. After Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th, I am getting 1 to 2 a day. And that means I'm getting contacted by parents, but I'm also getting contacted by students. My job is the conduit for schools and the community with the Israeli-American community to try to help Israeli Americans wherever they are. Because we know at the IAC that it's kind of difficult if you're coming from Israel. How do you navigate the very complex American community and then also education system? So that's where I come in. So in a situation like the one you just showed on that slide, I got called by you and then got called by a couple of parents. ask them to give me all of the information that they possibly have, because what I'm now going to do is reach out to the principal, the DEI, so the diversity, equity, inclusion. There's a bunch of different letters that schools, depending on how they like to present that person. But I talk to the person who is really in charge of making sure that the atmosphere at school is inclusive for all students. That's all students of all races, religions, ethnicities, sexual orientation, everybody. Because that's the goal of the educators. That's the goal of all of these administrations, is that they want to create an atmosphere where your child can go to school and learn in a place that's free from hate. However, as we all know, and especially after October 7th, that's not really the case. So I call up, in this case, I'm not going to name the city where this was from, but someplace in the greater Boston area. And I call up the principal, I talk to the DEI head, and then I also call up the superintendent and ask, how does something like this get through? Because while we want to promote Palestinian culture as much as possible, what we also want to do is make sure that that promotion of the culture doesn't come with either veiled or unveiled threats on Israelis or Jews. So in the case of this club, that one state solution that it poses at the very top, where it says one Palestinian state solution with equal rights for all, that's what the chant that many people have heard, from the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free. That's what that chant is. And as many people saw in the congressional meeting, the infamous congressional meeting with the three presidents of the Ivy League schools, that's a genocidal call. So that's not something that you want in your schools. And we like to give everybody the benefit of the doubt and say, look, we understand that you're trying to promote Palestinian culture. That is wonderful. In fact, we're here to help that. But where we have a problem is if you're calling for the end of Israel. And that's what that Palestine Club says. Now, I had the conversation with them. They said that the poster in this case wasn't vetted and that it wasn't something that was approved by the people who are in charge. Since October 7th, and this is something that I can talk about a little bit later, but since October 7th, we've heard that a lot, unfortunately, where schools vet something and then the students tend to do whatever they feel like. And this has happened in the last 2 weeks at two different schools where there are large, both Jewish American and Israeli American communities. So the schools are fighting an uphill battle, and I'm here to help them fight that uphill battle to rid their campuses of both Jew hatred and hatred of Israel.
Thanks, Jake. And I think one of the interesting things for people to understand, we're talking about some public school here that have children from 30, 40, 50 nationalities. So I'm not coming with the expectation that the entire team of a school will know the history of each country where the children are coming from. They will know about every conflict that's happening around the globe. And unfortunately, there are many conflicts that are happening around the globe over the years. I'm mostly thinking about what is a good practice that should be for a school if something like this happened. And we had that, we have the Ukraine and Russia, war. How can we ensure that students from a Russian background won't be bullied? Because they are not representing the country, and the school role is not to come and take sides or share an opinion about this conflict and other things around the world. So we're not, the expectation is not that every superintendent will be fully diverse and
it's impossible,
to understand it. But we want to make sure that there is good practice when something like this happens, before they put out any statement or before they agree for anything, they come to people that are knowledgeable. So in the case of the Israel-Hamas war and now growing, an expanding war, to come maybe to the Israel consulate, or to come to the Israeli families in their school, or to come to a local rabbi, or to come to somebody like you, if there is an Israeli-American council in a society, and to have a committee, to have a meeting, to learn from each other before they're putting anything out or dealing with that. So I do hope that, we will see more of that, and it will be interesting to hear from you. Are they open to this kind of conversation Because I'm talking as an American citizen, thinking about what kind of citizen we want to raise, what kind of society we want to build. And if this is a society where we want there is a space for everyone, we need to learn from everyone, I want them to use it as a teaching moment. They can learn something. So what do you see?
Exactly.
What's the response? Are they open to this kind of learning or the conversation?
Yes, and first and foremost, I do not envy any of the superintendents, the principals, the teachers right now. What they're going through, and you pointed it out perfectly, Rachel, is everybody is expecting them to know everything about every subject, down to the last minute detail. That is, quite frankly, impossible. You can't do that. Somebody like me, I love American military history. I love Israeli military history. My family is both Ashkenazi as well as Sephardi, so I love knowing things about the Iberian Peninsula. I also like to know as much as possible about the Pale of Settlement in Russia/Ukraine. So that means I do know a good deal about the Bolshevik Revolution. I know about the czars and czarinas. But if you ask me minute questions and want me to get down into the nitty-gritty, there is a better than likely chance I don't know 100% of what I'm talking about. And most of what I've been trying to impress upon parents right now is, okay, I personally don't think that it's the school's positions to send out a statement for every single thing that happens. Why? Because of exactly what you said and exactly what I just said. You don't want somebody making a statement about a subject where they're not 100% confident in what they're talking about. And many of both the superintendents and principals that have gotten themselves into, let's call it a little bit of trouble in the immediate aftermath of October 7th with their statements, it's because they didn't know enough about the subject. I don't think that's necessarily their fault. I think it's their fault if they don't then reach out to people like me. And that's what I do. I go to schools and I educate the educators, and I also give presentations to the students as well about very specific subjects. Like I was in Gann Academy last week, and I gave an hour-long presentation on Israel/Palestine from 1880 to today. Because at a Jewish high school, I want to make sure that people are looking at it from the other side. What would you think if all of a sudden there's this massive influx of people from the 1880s until today? You wouldn't feel good if all of a sudden your neighborhood gets crowded out by a bunch of people. But how does that happen? Those are the questions that a lot of people aren't asking. So how do you get to those answers? How do you get to that knowledge, that information? Bring in somebody like me from the IAC that teaches that as a living. Let us help you. I'm here to supplement the education at the educational institutions. That is, quite frankly, about 30 to 35% of my job. I was doing it a couple of times a year prior to October 7th. Post October 7th, I've now done it at 5 or 6 different schools in the area. But that's really what we're here for. We're here to try to help with information and to help with education on subjects that maybe the teachers and professors and educators aren't 100% confident that they can teach. And the last thing I think that we all want is bad information. No information, in my opinion, is better than bad information. And I think that's a lot of what we're starting to see is people coming around to that line of thinking.
And for me, I'm coming from a bigger picture of what is a good education. And here's the administration now actually showing by example what's a good education is. If you're not familiar on something, go and do your homework. And you can, and it's okay, and it's more than okay to come and say, I don't know, I need to go and do homework. And I do want to give, yes, a good shout out, one of the school in Lexington, Massachusetts, that several years ago, I was actually invited by the ESL department. They invited a different speaker to teach about the education system where their students coming from. Because they understood that different students coming from different countries where education system is a little bit different. Also, the values are different and the teaching style is different. So they wanted to understand each one. They brought me and I spoke about the Israeli education system and actually brought me several times. It was first for the teacher in the ESL language, and then it was it was open to other teachers as part of their professional development. And I found it very, very important to do it not just in a time of conflict or a war, but to really create an opportunity for people to learn about each other. And after that, actually, as a little anecdote, in the room, there were some students from the Muslim club, and they asked to meet with me because they said, we don't know much about Israel. Can we meet with you? And it was fascinating. It was like I was so thankful because for those people that don't know Lexington, Concord, in this area, we call it the cradle of democracy. This is where the war of the Revolutionary War took place. And this is such an important place, you know, that this message will come from us from here, that yes, there are sometimes wars about different important things, but what is the values that we want to teach? So I do hope that they will continue with this and bring people from different countries and teach them about the language differences. I also want to share another thing about this place. I moved to the United States about 30 years ago. And I remember when I got my citizenship, the judge at the ceremony said that they want everyone that come to bring their culture and tradition, religion, languages, but also to adopt the American values. Mm-hmm. And I found this message so important that it made me very proud American, that this is our value, to bring who we are, to learn from each other, but also to cherish our values of democracy, of learning about each other. So for me, looking right now at some of the culture and what's going on, I want to ensure that our children have the same message that I received from the judge when I became a citizen, and they can enjoy the diversity, the excitement, the differences between people. So Jake, I know that there was also recently the Massachusetts Teacher Board also sent a statement as part of that war. You mentioned the university presidents. What other thing do you see, or what do you see from students that you would like to share with us, particularly about this group?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think this piece of information is not going to be surprising for most people. But really, when we talk about hate, but even more specifically, anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism/Jew hatred, what we're seeing is not the fact that it comes up in schools, and it does. I have 24 different parent groups from Newton alone that have reached out to me personally. So that's not 24 parents like one mom and then another one is a dad, and that's two people. No, it's 24 different parent groups. And in this day and age, that actually means more than 50 because of stepdads and things like that. But it's the fact that they're getting anti-Semitism and hate in the schools, but then they can't get away from it. And what I mean by that is when they go online where everybody is, because now everybody has cell phones, you have to have it in order to communicate. And it's people as young as 10 years old that are on social media. And depending on the age, they're either on TikTok, and nobody, by the way, should be on TikTok of any bent for whatever reason. TikTok is not a thing you should be on because it's poison for your brain. It is the worst thing that you could possibly do for your child. But with all of that being said, many of them are still going to go on it if you're giving them anything but a flip phone. So the anti-Semitism that they're catching on both at their schools and then on social media is rampant. And if I could share right now, I just want to show you. So yes, there are the protests that everybody sees where you get chants, as I mentioned, like from the river to the sea. We showed the Palestine Club, but now we have this picture of a student at a local school. And I've blocked out the face. This student is showing a sign and proudly telling Israel, Hitler would be proud of you. And it's an Israeli flag shaking hands with a Nazi flag. Now, I'm somebody that thinks everybody should be allowed to talk. Everybody should be allowed to express their opinions. That, as you mentioned, Rachel, is the great experiment of America. It's you bring your values, you show America your values, you show why your culture is wonderful, and then you take that and you infuse it into American values. And now we can all have conversations. We're not all going to agree ever. I mean, Jewish people are notorious for not agreeing with anybody. The old joke of 2 Jews, 3 opinions, like that is the case. And if you've ever been to a Shabbat dinner, you know that to be the truth, but you need to be able to express those opinions. And what's happening right now is the fact that many opinions are deemed so wrong that they're not allowed to be expressed. And while I understand why people come to conversations like that and say, you know what, we can't do that, we can't discuss it, we're never going to get to a solution. Agree to disagree is actually a great place to be. It really is, because what it's saying is, look, I respect you enough to disagree with you, but then to not wish you dead or wish you harm or anything like that. What that judge told you, Rachel, when you got your citizenship is exactly, I think, what we've lost in America, is that ability to say, look, be proud of who you are, assimilate into America, but still hold on to the things that make you you. But then don't go over the line where you're creating a flag that is a Nazi flag with an Israeli flag saying Hitler would be proud. There are so many things that are wrong with that type of conversation. If you're somebody that wants to get to a solution, especially one to peace, which is so hard to achieve, you're never going to get to it if that's the type of conversation and that's the type of, let's call what it is, artwork / propaganda that you're putting out there. And we need to kind of bring everybody back from that precipice so we can move forward and have real conversations.
And another thing that I want to add, that for me, it's a little bit troubling when we think about education, what kind of citizen we want to raise, that many of the people that protest and say few things, they never think about their friends and what they're going through, about compassion, like their local friends. For example, there was one time I was in Israel during missiles and I had to run to a shelter, and I saw some of the young people write like, you deserve to be bombed, or you deserve to be this. And I know it's coming from ignorant, or they were brainwashed with some not the correct facts, unfortunately, for somebody that know the details and what's going on the ground, which is troubling of itself. You know, where do they get this information that they're being played by? It for me is very concerning that they don't see how they're getting played by. But they don't have the decency to reach out to their friends and say, I know that you have family in Israel. How are you doing? How are they doing? They lost these things. And I have to say, as not being a teenager anymore or a college student, many of the people that I know, I received so many phone calls, so many texts, so many emails from so many people, first of all, asking, how are you? How is your family? What do you hear from there? Before they're listening to the news. Because unfortunately, as we know, the news, like New York Times, BBC, CNN, and some of them, they chose a side. They're not really showing, it's not a great journalism. As somebody that is really familiar with the details of the conflict, when I look at what they're showing, it's really troubling because it's not good journalism. And then it makes me think, do they do the same thing about other topics that I'm not familiar with the details? So in some way, I'm raising this concern, not just about this specific conflict, but what other thing this supposedly journalism is brainwashing or choosing side or kind of navigating us and playing us. So I'm raising, these couple of things. One is the compassion. What does being a human need to be? And how can we teach it more in our school and in universities, and to have this conversation? And the other thing, what is the correct information, which is totally a different topic. And I don't know which one you want to talk about, but I think these are two very important things when we talk about what kind of education, what is good, how do we find the correct information?
So I'm going to hopefully tackle both of these right now. First, the compassion issue. When I hold my activism meetings for my teenagers, we call it Act and Impact. It's a really good program. Last year, it was the TAP, the Teen Ambassador program. Now we've rebranded it. It's Act and Impact. We talk about how people are feeling. We brought in mental health specialists because it's been just so difficult for so many of the students to try to process what they're hearing at school. But more importantly, what they're seeing on social media. And if they do, check out old school legacy media, what they're seeing in the media. So we do that. And one of the things that I tell my teenagers during these meetings is, look, if you really want to have a conversation, and a difficult one, I mentioned it before, invite somebody over for dinner. If you bring somebody over for food, it's one of the things where Israeli culture, Arab culture, Palestinian, all around the world, if you want to have a conversation and you're telling the other person, this is going to be a tough conversation, but look, I respect you, I trust you, invite them into your home, give them food, and trust me, you will have a bridge. Maybe you won't cross that bridge by the end of the night, but there will be a bridge. And that's the compassion that is missing, as you so rightfully pointed out, Rachel. The compassionate aspect right now is lacking. And so we need to figure out ways to mend those bridges if there used to be one, or build them if there weren't bridges beforehand. And for me, I mean, I'm a big guy. I'm 6'1" and 205 pounds, or 185 centimeters, 187 centimeters. I always forget the conversion in like 90 kilo, something like that. But I'm a big guy. I love food. But even the smallest person, say, look, I want you to come to my place. I want to have a conversation with you. It's going to be a tough conversation, but we'll have some food. And at the end of the night, you know what? We might not be friends, but at least we'll be cordial. And that's really something that I don't think we're doing a good enough job of, is we're making perfect the enemy of good. Let's get to good first. And if we can get to good and be cordial, then maybe we can get to perfect. And in this case, that would be peace. Now, the second thing, and this is really my area of expertise because I have a degree in broadcast digital journalism from the Newhouse School of Communication, Syracuse University. I hate saying that, but at least I am an accredited journalist, I guess, even though I did mostly sports. But the reason I did mostly sports is because I saw the biases that many quote unquote journalists take into their work. And for somebody like me, I tend to be more honest than I should. So when I gave my presentation to Gann Academy, the very first thing I said before I got going was, I work for the Israeli-American Council. I'm giving you a presentation on Israel and Palestine from 1882 today. If it sounds like I'm biased, it's because I'm biased. But I have no problem admitting that to you. I'm going to try to deliver this presentation in the most partisan manner possible. But even picking sources, even picking the material that I want to talk about, my biases are already in that decision. And I think if people are just more honest about what it is that they're using and the fact that they are biased, everybody is biased, it's just whether or not you want to admit it. But if people were more honest, we go back to that compassionate aspect. If you're more honest, people are more likely to listen to, maybe not agree with what it is that you're saying, but at least they'll listen and say, okay, he's honest enough with me, or she's honest enough with me that they're saying, hey, I am biased now that you know to take what I'm talking about with a grain of salt. Let me see if I'm the expert like you are, Rachel, in Israel-Palestine, Israel-Hamas, Israel-Arab relations. Now, you know, if something doesn't jive, is that because the other person is biased, or is that because they're factually incorrect? And now it's incumbent upon you to figure that out. And that's, I think, where a lot of people get held up. Not everybody's going to be 100% correct all of the time. So how do you bridge that gap is really the question.
And the thing again, we're talking about education in time of war. I'm really wearing the hat of education. What is good education? And good education is bringing facts. There is no two sides on facts. If we're talking particularly, for example, the Israeli-Palestinian, on the same territory, we have those groups set at the same time. You know, so this is a fact, and I can tell you that my father was born in 1935 in this land. At that time, it was under the British Mandate. Yes, it was called Palestine, Eretz Israel. So he was Palestinian Eretz Israel under the British. So we are talking, you know, so certain things are facts. You know, like when somebody come and say, yeah, all the Jews in Israel came after the Holocaust, it's incorrect. So this is not a fact. If they said all of the people that came to Israel came from Germany, this is not a fact because my grandparents came from Egypt, Libya, and Turkey. So I'm talking from my own personal knowledge that whoever is coming and teaching somebody and say everybody came after the Holocaust, this is not factual. It doesn't stand in the information.
Right.
And I know you're jumping to share something. What do you want to share with us, Jake?
So I'm just showing exactly what it is you're talking about. And it's why I was asked actually by one of the, you've moved to the side, so I apologize. I'm looking here. I should be right here down the middle. But one of the things you mentioned, Rachel, was the fact that there is this misconception that Israel was formed in the ashes of the Holocaust. Well, that's not necessarily true by any stretch, really, of the imagination. Modern Zionism, you can really date it to 1897 with the first Zionist conference in Zurich, Switzerland. But in terms of what was the population like, this, what you're looking at right now on your screen, this is the population and demographic changes in Israel/Palestine. And then you get to the whole question of why is it Palestine? Well, that's because the Romans, they wanted to get it out. The first time it's used is by Herodotus in his The Histories in the 5th century BCE. But it's actually, and this is a term that is in vogue, a colonialist movement by the Romans to take the word Israel, Eretz Yisrael, which, by the way, Aleph, Chik, Chak, Yud, is on so many coins dating back to the time of Jesus. And this is the stuff where, yes, you can have your own perception as to history, and you can take whatever it is you want from history. But facts are facts. There's no such thing as good facts. There's no such thing as bad facts. They are facts. You're the one that's saying, well, this is an easy fact to digest. Or you're the one that's saying this is a hard fact to digest. A hard fact for many Israelis and Jews who believe in Zionism, like me, think that it's a hard fact to digest that upwards to 800,000 Palestinians were displaced. Now, that is a fact. What most people then don't bother to ask is the why behind that. And for me, I'm not happy enough just taking a fact at base level. I always want to know the why behind a situation. And I think, and you keep saying that you're putting your educator's hat on, that's one of the things we just don't go deep enough. And while we have all of the information at our fingertips on our computers and on our phones, we don't really think enough about the facts that were delivered. I used to remember being in high school, reading Civil War histories and personal letters from Civil War soldiers. But then after I read that, I then go and I look up the battle. I figure out what is this person talking about. And we don't, it's almost like we don't expect enough from our children in the more traditional sense of dealing with facts. Good facts, bad facts, easy facts, hard facts, they are facts. It's what you do with them that really is the most important thing.
Yeah, thanks. There's another thing, you mentioned earlier the hearing at the Congress with the 3 presidents of the universities, that I was looking at it in real time and listening to this. And I think that we should all teach this hearing around the world and really watch it very carefully, because there are many things, and again, as an educator that I was looking, that I was very troubled. Not necessarily about what they said about the context or, the Judaism and anti-Semitism, but for me, as the head of university, of one of the leading institution in the world, not just in America, when they were asked about freedom of speech in the university, they said that there is freedom of speech, even though they, by practice, actually showed that they didn't have freedom of speech, because they repeat the same sentences that probably they were advised by lawyer how to say. And for me, it was very sad, because I was looking at this leader that I understand where they came from of answering those questions, that they wanted to make sure that their institution won't be sued or they won't get to jail or whatever. But they were the example that there is no freedom of speech. And for me, that was very, very sad. The other thing that was very sad, there were many questions about details and knowledge, which they didn't have. They didn't do their homework. So what kind of message is it sending about education? And again, these are my concerns because I'm thinking about America as leader in many ways. How can we ensure that our students, our leaders are doing their homework, using their brain, really saying what they think is the right thing to say? How do we keep the diversity, not just to talk and have a position in the university, but really celebrate the diversity, not to come and put somebody because we need to, but rather to celebrate. I can tell you when I moved to America, I was part of this group in the university that we did cooking group every week. And every week we went to the house of somebody else. And I remember in this house, you had to leave your shoes outside. In this house, you had to leave your shoes on. In this house, you knew that you were going to come an hour later because this was the time, you come an hour later. And I learned, and it was fascinating. We celebrated holidays with our children and we sang in many different languages. And I remember how extraordinary it is to be in America. And I want to make sure that we continued with that. So for me, I want to take you to the next question. What message are we sending teachers in the classroom, principals, superintendent, head of the university, but also parents and children? What are some of the messages we need to take and learn from this conflict that really shook the entire country, the entire world? What can we learn to ensure a place that can thrive?
For me, and this is going to be more of an old school piece of advice. My dad, your father was born in 1935. Mine was born in 1941. So I think we come from a little bit older, but for me, it's the easy thing is, especially when it comes to situations like this, the easy thing more times than not is not the right thing. If you want to do something that's worthwhile, it's going to be difficult. And that includes reading things about your culture and your history that you don't like. So, for example, I'm from New England. I'm from a very small farm town on the border between Connecticut and Massachusetts. I used to do sports broadcasting when I was in my 20s. One of the schools that I did that with was Amherst College. Now, Amherst College, their mascot today is the mammoth. It used to be the Lord Jeff. And that is because Lord Jeffrey Amherst, the town is named after Lord Jeffrey Amherst. And so the school, which was founded there, they decided that their mascot is going to be this guy, Lord Jeffrey Amherst. Now, many people don't know who he is, but there's a very easy way to describe him. He's the smallpox blanket guy. That's who Lord Jeffrey Amherst is. Now, I have two options when it comes to a piece of information like that. Do I try to bury it because it's awful and it means that the history of the country that I love is filled with warts and cancer and poison? Or do I say, look, this is how the country was founded. This is the terrible way that many of the settlers and the colonialists treated the Native American community, especially in New England. For me, I want to bring more of that information to light. So is that an easy thing to do, or is that a hard thing to do? That's a hard thing to do. But am I afraid of doing that? Absolutely not. What we need to do is use that mindset when it comes to this type of conflict and really conflict in general. One of the hardest things to do, and I'm sure you as an educator have taken many of these classes, mediation classes. How many people do you know the first time that they tried to mediate a subject ended doing a really good job? Like, I'm sure you as an educator have been in the middle of two students fighting where you're like, I have no idea how I'm going to bring the temperature down in this conversation. But you as a good educator, you as a good parent, how many children do you have, Rachel? 2, right? So you as a wonderful parent know how to do this. It's not going to be the same thing every single time, but you need to know enough about the topic. So it's twofold for me. Recognize that what you're going to do is difficult, but and this is most important, extremely worthwhile. And then 2, learn about the subject. Me, somebody who has 6 siblings, kind of naturally, instinctually figured out how to navigate different conversations and things like that. But as I got older and I had to start dealing with single children who have a completely different way of going about stuff, how do I talk to those people? It's never enough to think that you know everything. The second that you think you know everything about a subject is the second you know nothing. So we need to have the hard conversations, and we need to tell ourselves, I need to do better. There's nothing wrong with saying, I can do better. I can learn more. In fact, that's kind of the American ideal. And anybody that wants to succeed in life knows that's how you get forward. So I think if we start teaching those 2 things more than anything else, we'll start kind of breaking down those barriers, and then more things will open up.
Great. Couple of more questions for you. What is your message for those students that are going to those schools or universities and right now facing and maybe scared, worried, don't know what to do with that? And again, we're talking specifically this time about Israeli and Jewish students, but also I think in general, if somebody else feels some kind of threatened based on their country, their origin, or sex orientation, anything that it is, what is the message for them? How do we support them during these challenging times in a place that should be a safe place for them, a place for growth? And here it's turning into a place of worries and a place that they can't actually thrive and learn, but they need to, to think about their own safety.
Yeah, you see the commercials. They started to come out in the late 90s. So when I was about 12 years old or so, going into my teenage years, and it was usually about either issues with suicide ideation or LGBTQIA community, and the message of you're not alone. That's true. Jewish, Israeli American, Black, gay, whatever. You're not alone. There are people that you can talk to. Sometimes it's the exact people that you think you should be talking to about it. But there are good people in this world, and there are people that are going to listen. Now, I'm 36 years old. I started therapy at, I want to say, 33 years old. It's very, very recent. If I didn't do that, I wouldn't be married right now. My favorite thing about me is my wife. That's the thing. This thing right here, whoops, I was covering it. This is my favorite thing. You see the Hanukkah gnomes above me and the Batman, Lego, and Pac-Man, and Nintendo. That's my wife. She Legos all the time. When I see her, there's a huge smile on my face. Now, that's a rant about how much I love my wife because I'm a gushy person and everybody should know that about me. But I'm saying that because I talked to somebody. By talking to somebody, I was able to figure out all of these things that I'm feeling. If you try to keep that all inside, it's not going to work for you. Whether you think it's a big thing or whether you think it's a little thing, if something is bothering you, tell somebody. Tell your parent, tell your sibling, get a therapist, but don't keep it to yourself. That doesn't help anybody. And worse, it's going to hurt you in both the long run as well as the short term. So feel free to share. Like, so many things I can point at that I feel like we do wrong. That's one of the best things that we have developed over the past couple of decades. You're not alone, and talk to somebody if you have issues. That's my job. Literally my job with the Israeli American Council is to listen to students if they're facing anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism. At the same time, I talk to them about their school plays. I talk to them about how their basketball is going. The fact that they're upset with their coach that they didn't put them in the last game. Like, I'm here to listen to it. And there are so many people like me that are around in this area, no matter what it is that you want to talk about, that will listen to you. So please, you're not alone, and talk to somebody if you've got issues.
Jake, are you...
Issues, by the way, just real quick, issues aren't negative, mind you. Issues, I know some people hear issues and think that's a negative connotation. Welcome to the world. Everybody's got issues. You're not unique when it comes to that. So share them.
Jake, I don't know if you're already doing it or you're thinking about it. Do you have any community of practice of maybe few principals or teachers at schools that you meet regularly to talk about this issue, especially now with this war unfolding?
Yeah, so fortunately and unfortunately, I talk to a lot of superintendents and principals. It really depends on the area. I've been given out the name of one of our mental health professionals because she speaks both Hebrew and English. And so she's been terrific. Can I mention her name on this? Do you want me to? Miri Bar Halpern. She's amazing. A tiny, tiny lady, but has the heart of an absolute lion and is one of the most receptive people I've ever had the pleasure of speaking with. But if there's anybody that you can talk to, remember, all of your schools have mental health therapists on site, and they're there for you. And they're there specifically because they know you're going to have some things that come up that you don't know how to deal with it. I'm 36 years old. You look to be about 37. I'm sure that we deal with stuff on a daily basis that we're still not sure at our ages how to deal with it. You guys, if you're listening and you're a student, are 15 to 20 years younger. Why do you think you know the answer to everything? That's not smart. You don't know everything, and that's okay. So go and speak out and reach out to people whenever you need it.
Yeah. And we started this conversation with understanding that being over 5,000 miles away from the conflict and not knowing the history, that we understand that the school are not prepared to deal specifically with this issue or with this pain of their students. Is there any final message you want to give them about the day-to-day? Yes, we want them to take a class. We want them to learn. If they're interested, we can send them a website. What is the message? How to support parents and the children in their school at the moment? How to support students in colleges at the moment? A short term, we have the long term of the learning, that it's one thing, but what is the short term right now?
The short term right now, kind of the same theme that I've been hitting on. But if you're an educator right now, listen to the students, listen to the parents. I'm telling you, that is going to solve 80% of your issues. 20%, that's going to be difficult. But also, as I said beforehand, anything worth doing is going to be difficult and it's going to be worthwhile. So that's the 20%. But kind of the easy part, and it might be, and I've been in some of these meetings, in fact, a large handful of these meetings where the parents are going to yell and they're going to be upset and they're going to be showing off all different kinds of emotion. But by simply taking the meeting, by simply listening and not responding, and that's one of the things I always had to learn, is I used to be one of those people like, I want to talk now. I want to talk now. I want to talk now. No. You got to listen. You have to slow down and actually pay attention. We teach like the ARM technique of acknowledge, reframe, manage messaging, and things like that. But for us, when somebody is emotionally charged, let's call it that, and everybody right now is emotionally charged. Some are at 10s, some are at 4s, some are at 7s. Everybody, especially in the Israeli American and Jewish American communities, everybody is emotionally charged. But if you honestly want to help and get to a place where the community is going to be on your side and back you and support you no matter what it is that you do, simply taking the messages and listening to people and responding. And it might just be, hey, let me get to this in a couple of weeks, but I hear your worry. I understand your anxiety. That is going to fix 80% of the problem, because most of these communities, what they're feeling right now is that nobody is listening to them. And what's worse, nobody is listening to them at one of the worst times in their life. And that's the thing that many of the educators are missing. And honestly, it's because they're overwhelmed as well. So while that was a message for the educators and the administrators, there's also a message for the parents and the students. If they say we're on it, if they say we are listening, believe them. Now, if they say it 3 times and nothing's happening, we can have a different conversation. But everybody right now, and you mentioned this earlier, Rachel, everybody needs to work on being compassionate more than anything else. If my wife heard that, she would be laughing right now. But those are my messages. If you're an educator, listen, listen, listen. If you're a parent, be a little bit more compassionate. Understand that this was not a situation that any of these educators or administrators were in any way prepared for. So there's a huge gap between these two sides. Just be a little bit more patient and things will get better.
Great. I want to also take us to the streets of Boston for a second. The Freedom Trail that we are
famous for.
Very famous for, and in particular, the Holocaust Memorial in downtown Boston. And there's one of the quotes that is on the wall there that I feel very strongly appropriate for now and appropriate anytime. And I think it was deliberately part of the Freedom Trail. Yep. And it says, they came first for the communists and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the Jews and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Jew. Then they came for the trade unionists and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came for the Catholic and I didn't speak up because I was a Protestant. Then they came for me, and by that time, no one was left to speak up. And for me, this is, every time that I go there, every time I look at it, this is a message. And again, we're starting with the war of Israel and Hamas and that particular war. And now we're talking about that, but tomorrow it will be something else because this is the way human life, we didn't figure out a way to avoid wars and these conflicts. So I think it's very important for us sitting here in New England and hopefully sending this message about education, what is good education, to learn, to research, to listen, compassion, to know that we are not alone, we're in it together. Some of these messages that we raise up here today. So Jake, unless you have any last question for me or any thought that you want to share, we can wrap this wonderful conversation.
No, I really don't. The only thing that I would add to that, you pulled out a quotation from the Holocaust, and it's one of the most impactful. It talks about, honestly, don't just do things for yourself. You must do things for other people, because this world spins around and around and around, and everything always tends to come back. And if you want to understand why it's so hard for people to do things, I just want to share one more. And that is, this is one of my favorite books. It's now a Netflix documentary, but this is Ordinary Men. The book was written by Christopher Browning. It's all about how peer pressure can lead you to do horrible, horrible things. And that when it's the toughest thing imaginable, you still must do it. And so look at that quotation, ruminate on the quotation that you brought up, Racheli. At the same time, pick up a book of Ordinary Men or or watch the Netflix documentary, because we are all in this together. And I know we like to get tribal, and I know we like to say my side and the other side, and that's how we talk, but we're all on this earth together. And this country that we, the two of us, are currently in my opinion, is the greatest country in the world because of its differences, because of the different cultures, societies, and ways of thinking. And we've taken all the best from every single society and turned it into a wonderful thing. It doesn't mean that everything in the history of this country is perfect. It is far from perfect. But if you read Frederick Douglass, and nobody has had as hard of a life as Frederick Douglass, born into slavery, and becomes, in my opinion, one of the top 3 Americans of all time. It's George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Frederick Douglass, and then I'm from New England, so Ted Williams, because I have to throw a New England athlete in there. But we're all in this together. So it's very important to remember that when it feels as if we're at each other's throats, take a step back for a second. Try to think about what it is that you are thinking, and more importantly, why you think it. And if you can slow yourself down, trust me, you can have the type of conversations that will lead us through conflicts like what's happening right now in the war between Israel and Hamas, and now 6 other entities, as well as other issues that we are all facing right now. So just thank you so much for having me on, Rachel. Per usual, I said I didn't have much to say, answering that last question, then spent 5 minutes talking. So thank you for having me on, and thank you everybody for listening.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Jake, for joining us today at Education in a Time of War. I'm Rachel Raz. This was fascinating, Jake. Thank you for all the work that you're doing to ensure a good education, safe, and to work with many people in our community. And please join us for other Education in a Time of War. Every week I'm holding different conversation with people, and I hope that you will learn from it. Hopefully we'll get stronger and get some ideas about a good education and something that we can grow from and be positive and not just be drawn to some of the negativities in the time. So thank you, Jake, and take care. Thank you.
להתראות, בכיף.
להתראות.